Thank you so much for being here. This morning we have with us Congressman Brandon Gill. This is your first year in Congress as a freshman, and if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the committees and the makeup of your district, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. So just a little bit of background on myself. I grew up on a cattle ranch in West Texas outside of Abilene. Ended up going to college in the Northeast, which is where I met my beautiful wife. We've been married for about 8 years now, have 2 young children, one of them who was born about 6 weeks ago. But we live just north of Dallas in Texas 26, and my district encompasses about 3 counties there, kind of the suburbs north of the DFW area. Conservative, red district, great place to be, beautiful area. It's kind of the most idyllic place you could think of for where you would want to raise a family is right there in Flower Mound, Texas. So got elected about, last fall. Have been here for 6 weeks now. And I serve on 3 committees, the Budget Committee, Judiciary, and Oversight. So I've been involved in, one, shepherding the big, beautiful bill through the House, which is what we do on the Budget Committee. But also in a lot of work with Doge on oversight and on immigration for judiciary. So it's been a very exciting time.
Now I have to ask, being on Oversight Committee and having, the news lately of what happened in New York City, one of our biggest cities in the country is New York City. It's the epicenter of capitalism, it's the epicenter of finance. It seems poised that one of our biggest cities is about to elect an actual socialist Democrat. What was your reaction when you saw that news coming through, and what kind of statement do you think this makes for the progressive movement and really American politics as you're seeing this unfold?
Yeah, I think of it as the Democrat Party right now, as we know, they have no leadership, they have no message. So what happens is somebody like this Zoran Mamdani guy starts to fill the void. So this is a guy who has been a United States citizen for 7 years or so, not very long. He wants to defund the police, defends globalize the Intifada, and wants to create sort of a communist economic landscape in, to your point, the heart of capitalism in the United States, New York City. Wants to create public grocery stores. I mean, this is what you get whenever you have a Democrat Party that has gone so far to the left that they're electing lunatics who are essentially going to tear down this country.
You've done such a good job being here just a short 6 months in your line of questionings and really taking that responsibility, that congressional constitutional authority that Congress has, and exercising that oversight power. And whenever your committee had in all the Democrat mayors, and you went through the line of asking the Democrat mayors as, the crisis that we were left to pick up the pieces from the Biden administration of 4 years of open borders, porous borders, and you asked every mayor what the exact cost was from the impact of these open borders. And it was Mayor Eric Adams, I believe, I think he said it was around $6.9 billion in cost to the city of taking care of criminal illegal aliens who were coming into the city. What kind of impact do you think this new mayor might have on trying to correct that problem, if at all? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, this is a guy who I think is take every far left position that the Democrats have talked about, and this guy's even further to the left. New York City is a city that's had a lot of issues with crime. Walk down the streets now and you'll see illegal aliens taking over luxury hotels. I mean, it has gone so far downhill so quickly, and this guy is just going to expedite that process. Wanting to defund the police in your most densely populated cities is insane. That's something that almost every American agrees with, whether you're Republican or Democrat, outside of these liberal hellholes like New York. So it's really sad to see more than anything. I think you're going to see. I think it's going to be a tough place for Jewish Americans to live if you have a mayor who refuses to condemn globalize the Intifada, who wants to defund the police, who wants to He's talked a lot about going after what he calls hate crimes, which we know is a way of targeting conservatives. So I think it's really sad to see one of our great cities decline in the way that New York has.
And we talk about, helping to bring back law and order. Of course, a number one priority is making sure our border security efforts are fully funded. We have this tax bill that's moving through that is a part of your committees, and you've been on the budget committee, so you've really seen this process from the very beginning and done a lot to make sure that we have and can secure that funding, about $150 billion for border security, making sure that even elements of some of our military are there to support our ICE agents, which you've talked about. As we kind of look at this and we look at kind of some of the lies that have been uncovered, we've heard Democrats say that, oh, well, you're fascists and you are mobilizing the military. Is that a little bit of a two-faced lie that Democrats or some on the far left, and I say Democrats, but what I really mean are the far left and how extreme and radicalized this party, some of the leaders in this party have gone. How do you see that unfolding?
Yeah, there's a couple things there. First is on what the Democrats actually believe on immigration. And you see them rioting in the streets right now in LA and in other major cities. And what are they rioting for? They're rioting to make sure that federal officials or local officials cannot uphold our immigration laws. They're utterly against deportations, even in instances whenever we're deporting the worst of the worst, people who've come into the country illegally, murdered or raped American citizens, burned our buildings down, assaulted people. These are the people the president's trying to get out of the country, and these are the people that either radical judges, Democrat members of Congress, or just far left activists are doing everything they can to keep here. And I think the reality is that as it relates to illegal immigration, Democrats have made the bet that all of these people coming into the United States are going to impact our electoral system in their favor. Whenever you flood the country with illegal aliens, that benefits blue states at the expense of red states when it comes to congressional apportionment, for instance. I think Democrats have talked a long time about providing a pathway to citizenship, giving amnesty to illegal aliens, and they've made the bet that these people are going to be future perpetual Democrat voters. So whenever they see us deporting illegal aliens, what we see, Republicans see, we see invaders who came into our country illegally, who have no business being here, who have no claim to our resources, and who need to leave. Democrats see potential voters and people who can rig our election system in their favor. That's the core difference, I think. I don't think that there's any other explanation for why you would not want to get murderers and rapists out of our country. And to your point, this one big beautiful bill goes a long ways in helping solve this problem.
And you've been very behind the president when we talk about the need, and he needs the resources to hire those CBP agents. Being from Texas, this is very important, and especially with the reaction, I think you have to be, at least look with a little bit of glimmer at what's been happening in New York City, thinking that more are going to come to Texas, and your district is going to grow even more with some of what's happening there.
Yeah, the thing with the resources is, for so long, Republicans have been asking for border security. We just want to be able to determine who comes into our country and make sure that these people are coming on our terms and not theirs. And we've had a border crisis, honestly, for decades. President Trump was the first president who was serious about securing our border. We had a border crisis under Republican administrations. And the issue in Congress was always, Republicans would say, we want a border wall, or we want funding for border security, or whatever it is. And then because we didn't have 60 votes in the Senate, we'd go to Democrats and we'd say, to pass a bill, we got to negotiate with you guys. We want border security, what do you want? And they say, we want mass amnesty. We want all these illegal aliens who came in here to be given a pathway to citizenship. And for Republicans, and myself included, that's a hard no. We're not doing that. So we weren't able to get real border security done. And that's something the American people have been begging for. The beauty of this one big beautiful bill that the president's been pushing so hard is that we're able to bypass that 60-vote threshold in the Senate. We only need a simple majority in the Senate to pass this bill. So we're able to get all of our border security priorities done without negotiating with Democrats. So we get everything we want. We get a border wall, we get river barriers, 10,000 new ICE agents, funding for over 1 million deportations a year. Democrats don't get anything they want. That's a huge win in my mind.
I think what you said right there is critically important. You know, this is a bill of what you've worked on and fought for, this funding for border security.
Yep.
You know, that essentially is a conservative bill. It's making sure that we can get this through the Senate on a fast-track process.
Yep.
And I think it's so shocking, especially when you've done such a good job at exposing a lot of what the far left has done and how, you know, they were for control during the COVID crisis. I mean, the leader who was the party's nominee for vice president last year, Governor Walz, it seems like it was only yesterday when he was deploying the National Guard to the streets, and you can actually watch the videos where the National Guard was firing pepper balls for people who didn't close their doors and isolate themselves. And it seems like the far left was cheering that on. But now, when we have a real crisis and we're actually doing something to remove the criminals, the criminal illegal aliens, it's almost been like such a two-faced happenstance over the course of only, you know, a year or so.
You know, it is, and the amazing part about it is how unpopular the Democrats' position has been. You know, they would always tell us that once you start deporting people, the American people are gonna see what's going on and they're gonna turn on Trump. That has not happened. President Trump's approval ratings are still very strong, and voters, by and large, support Republicans over Democrats by huge margins on immigration and on the economy, by the way. So they're seeing what's happening and they're saying, listen, we realize there's been a big problem with illegal immigration. We saw what Joe Biden did to our border. We saw him flood this country with 15 million plus illegal aliens. And finally, we have a president who's actually willing to fix the problem. And they support him for it. And they're thankful for it. And I'm thankful for it. So, you know, we've got a lot more to do. But the president is doing such a phenomenal job of putting the American people first, saying we're not going to allow criminals and murderers and rapists to stay in our community who shouldn't have come here to begin with. And we're not going to allow this massive flood of illegal aliens who are suppressing working class American wages. We're going to put our people first. And that's what we need in Washington, and thankfully we have it.
Do you see, from sitting on your position on the Judiciary Committee, obviously this is the focus point for immigration and finding a solution to our immigration. Where do you see that going on from your perspective on committee? Just finding a solution to immigration.
So, you know, as we talked about, the first thing is getting this bill passed to secure the border and to provide funding for continued border security so that the president can continue doing what he's been doing, which is what he said he was going to do on the campaign trail. I think the next step will be continued deportations and making sure that we have funding for that. And that we can continue exposing who these people are who are in our country. You know, we just arrested hundreds of Iranian nationals who came across our border illegally at a time whenever we're involved in some dealings in the Middle East that have gotten tense recently. That's dangerous. Most people can see that that's dangerous. So I think it's a continuation of what the president has been doing. But I do think that we need a fix of our legal immigration system as well. We bring in about 1 million legal immigrants every single year. A huge portion of those are via chain migration, which is people who come into the country and then they bring you know, their brother and then their brother's family and then their brother's family's family in a kind of a limitless cycle. That's something that I think most Americans disagree with. It's something in the past the president has talked about. I think that's a very clear area of reform. But I think we've got a lot of work to do on the legal immigration side. We have an extraordinarily generous legal immigration system. And I think we need to make sure that whenever people are coming in to our country legally even, that they're coming in on our terms, that they're people we believe can definitively contribute in a positive way to our country.
Now, One thing, as you also sit on the Oversight Committee, you've done a lot of work on the Doge caucus,
Yep.
or especially with Doge in terms of where you're at on the Oversight Committee. Now, the left is saying that Doge is over. Elon has left. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Can you tell us what really is going on from your perspective? You've done such a great job at highlighting a lot of the waste, fraud, and abuse, and we have this rescissions package that's come, and thankfully the House has passed, and it's over in the Senate right now. But can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on with that process and removing some of this waste, fraud, and abuse?
Sure, and what Elon Musk did was extraordinary. In a matter of 100 days, 110 days, identifying $180 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. And he may be gone, but the Doge movement continues. In other words, he totally reframed the way I think Congress looks at government spending. We're a lot more aware that there could be, and there oftentimes are, hidden areas of spend that we've appropriated that are going to left-wing causes, for instance. So the scrutiny that Doge provided initially is going to continue moving forward. Now, what are the next steps after he's identified all of that? It's codifying those Doge cuts to make them permanent, to claw back money that's already been appropriated, and to right-size future appropriations bills to make sure we're not funding, transgender surgeries in Guatemala. We passed the first rescission bill about a week and a half ago, which defunds NPR and PBS, state-sponsored media, and large portions of USAID, which is where a lot of that really egregious, wasteful foreign policy spend was going. So we got the first one done. We've got many more that we have to do to codify these cuts into law, and I think that we're going to be seeing more rescission bills, especially after we get the reconciliation bill done.
And one of the things at America First Policy Institute that our policy researchers have done is, over the past number of years, this is actually something that we've called for. Our funding, the way that America funds certain causes need to align with American values.
Yep.
And you have talked about this on committee, and I want to go back to when we talk about this rescissions package or codifying some of these Doge cuts to waste. You highlighted in February, we're not just talking about getting rid of USAID. We're talking about getting rid and eliminating $1.5 million that was spent to promote job opportunities for LGBTQ members in Serbia. And do you think that's really a reflection of our American values? I know on committee you highlighted this effort, and I thought that was great, among many others.
Right. You've seen the administrative state just go entirely rogue. For a long time, there was a sort of implicit agreement or understanding that whenever Congress appropriated funds for different programs, they would then be spent in a way that was consistent with the spirit of what Congress was appropriating them for. In other words, sort of in line with what Congress was thinking. And the administrative state went rogue and started spending appropriated money on programs like what you just highlighted. And what ended up happening is you've created this massive left-wing ecosystem that is funded by government that Congress did not want to fund. And I think that raises the question of how much of the left's political movement would be actually viable if it weren't for government funding for their causes. For instance, the left is pushing the idea that men should be in women's bathrooms, boys should be in girls' sports. Men and women are totally androgynous. There's no difference between men and women. Those are insane ideas. Those are ideas, to your point, that most Americans find utterly repulsive, that conflict with our most deeply held moral and religious values. And yet that's been kind of on the forefront of the left's political agenda. And I really wonder how successful would they have been in promoting these ideas if it weren't for taxpayer dollars. And that gets at the root of the Doge movement, I think. It's not just about fiscal sanity. That's a big deal. Our debt is a cataclysmic problem. We've got to fix it. But the real problem is that the American people have seen their tax dollars weaponized against them to promote values that they find disgusting, and that's one of the biggest things. And that's the thing that I get most excited about with Doge. is saying we're no longer going to turn your tax dollars against you.
And you had the opportunity to, you talked about the NPR and PBS cuts. You had the opportunity to question the CEO of NPR, and what was highlighted, there was a 25-year veteran reporter, I think it was a senior editor with NPR, that really lifted the hood under what was going on. And of course, what we talk about eliminating public financing of these these entities, we're not talking about eliminating them. We're just talking about taking back taxpayer dollars.
Right.
And he exposed that there were 87, was it 87 to 0, I think it was?
87 to 0.
To 0.
Yep.
That's not even remotely anywhere close to being fair and balanced on any means.
87 Democrats on their staff, 0 Republicans. For a state-sponsored media, that's crazy.
Wow. What was going through your mind when you were sitting there and asking her a number of your questions?
The thing with NPR and PBS is that, to your point, they can say whatever they want. We have a First Amendment right. You can spew all kinds of leftist nonsense if that's what you want to do. You have the First Amendment right to do that. But you don't have a constitutional right to our tax dollars. And that's what we're getting at here. NPR and PBS for a long time have been promoting left-wing propaganda, and Republicans for decades have talked about defunding them and just saying we don't need state-sponsored media in the United States. China and North Korea have state-sponsored media. We don't need that here. And finally we're doing it. But whenever I was questioning Catherine Marr, she's the CEO of NPR, what I wanted to highlight was what these people actually believe. So we just went back through her public statements, her social media posts, articles she had written, and I just wanted to simply ask her, do you believe this? For instance, do you still believe in race-based reparations? And I was really taken aback in the hearing because she was clearly completely unprepared. And she had been prepped for probably days by a team of lawyers who were sitting right behind her in that hearing. And clearly, whenever I asked her, do you believe in race-based reparations? She no, I actually have never said that. I said, actually, you have. And I held up her tweet and read it back to her. Yes, reparations, yes, on this day, yes, now. Asked her about a book that she claimed that she took a whole day off of work to read, The Case for Reparations. Said she couldn't recall any of it. Asked her about, do you believe that white people inherently feel superior to other races? She said, no, I've never said that. I said, actually, you tweeted that. You said you woke up feeling superior. Ha, how white of me. I mean, by the way, that's a bizarre. Normal people don't say things like that.
That was certainly revealing.
but the thing was that that is what these leftist elitists believe. And whenever you can show that our tax dollars fund her salary, your tax dollars pay for her salary, to promote ideas that you find repugnant, that's a problem. And that was the point of that hearing, was to really show who these people are and what they believe and what we're funding. On top of that, you mentioned the bias at NPR, that 87 Democrats, 0 Republicans. NPR was infamous, I should say, for deliberately choosing not to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story. Mm-hmm. In their own words, they said, we're not going to cover it because it's a distraction. That was the biggest news story, perhaps of the decade, that they chose not to cover. So, these are outlets that in my mind, I would be totally fine if they went out of existence. I think the American public would be better off for it. I don't really think they provide any meaningful value at all. Mm-hmm. But if they can survive on their own without our tax dollars, they have the right to do it. But we certainly shouldn't be paying for this nonsense.
Absolutely. And you've had a lot of being in the trenches on committee. I think I saw something about one of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle had a poster board of polling, and it was pointed out by one of your colleagues, a Republican member, that the polling didn't quite add up. Was that the case?
This is who we're up against. It's a good example. I forget what the poll was about.
I think it was on Doge cuts. I'm pretty
Maybe
sure
it was on
if the Americans support
cuts.
it. Yeah.
And if you add up, approve, disapprove, not sure, it added up to 110%. And one of my colleagues, I think it was Brian Jack, just asked, was that intentional, or what's going on? And you could tell the Democrats were really embarrassed because it looked ridiculous. But that's what we're up against here. I think that they also realize how unpopular this stuff is, and this is part of Democrats not having a message. They're worried that their ideological infrastructure is getting gutted because they're not going to be subsidized by tax dollars. But they also realize how unpopular that subsidization is. So they don't know what to do, and they're just grasping at straws.
Now, if taking all your time on committee and looking at this, you had a line about we were actually funding, I think it was a little over $5 million that we were actually providing to another country for pregnant boys. So I use that as an example because that made my eyes pop.
Yep.
But of all the line items of funding that you've seen with USAID and some of the other things, has there been anything more egregious that has caught your mind and stood out to you that we're eliminating?
Well, I mean, that was the...
that was pretty big.
There's a grant that we highlighted earlier this week, and it was to study, it was for a pregnancy programs, to your point, for transgender boys. And whenever I read it in the hearing, and I couldn't help but laugh because it's so ridiculous and so weird that this is what the left is focused on. But you know, it's almost like every single day you find something new. It's pregnancy for transgender boys today. Tomorrow it's Sesame Street in Gaza, and then the next day it's, you know, climate justice in Portugal. You know, there's always something new, but it really never gets old. And you get to the point where nothing is surprising anymore from these people.
Now, it's certainly been refreshing to have you as a freshman member and putting the time and the effort and taking your role as a member and for your constituents so seriously, and in that role of oversight. Where do you see, for your time throughout this Congress and Congresses going forward? Is there anything that you want to focus on in particular, the direction that you want to take? Or is there anything that you want to focus on in particular, the direction that you want to take?
You know, I'd like to continue highlighting what the left actually believes. One of the things I've realized in these hearings is that because they've gone so far to the left, you don't have to do a whole lot of work to expose them. For instance, we had a hearing yesterday with it was on DEI, and they had some crazy leftist DEI expert in there. And all I had to do was ask him, sir, do you believe that people should be treated differently based on their race? Yes or no? And he couldn't answer. Now, this is another issue that 80%, if not 90% or more of Americans believe that you shouldn't be treated differently based on your race. Most people want to live in a colorblind society. They don't think it's right for a business to take race into account whenever they're hiring, or college admissions to give different standards for different people based on their race. So all you have to do is ask them these things, and then they twist themselves up in knots and get frustrated because they realize that this is actually what I believe. Leftists actually believe you should be treated differently because of the color of your skin, but they also know how crazy that sounds, and they know that most people disagree with them. So I'd like to just continue exposing and highlighting to the American people what Democrats believe, and I think that that goes a long ways in helping catalyze legislative change and in promoting the conservative movement.
Well, we certainly thank you for your time, and we're very blessed to have you as a member and just the work that you're doing. It's exciting to have you as an ally for the America First movement, and we're excited for what happens the rest of this Congress.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.